wonderful time over here. And Luann and Carroll, of course, are still here. I've moved away, but I haven't forgotten. I'm still home, and I love it over here. My mother's neighborhood, and I certainly love the Laws.
With Mrs. Thomas next door, I would never have had enough ice cream if it were not for her. But I was welcome in their kitchen at any time. I knew exactly where my ice cream was in the freezer next to the refrigerator. And she and Mr. Thomas and I would sit around the table from time to time and chat. And it wasn't because the daughters who were older than I was were my best buddies. It was because the Thomases were my best buddies.
Francis even went over there one time and said, "Who has been eating my ice cream?"
Of course, unlike my father, I deny it.
Well, I have said to my father over the years, and my mother is right there behind me, that the expectations were such they were impossible to live up to. And I used to call him from college with my latest achievements, minor though they might be. And I finally said to him, "Dad," because he would say to me, "Well, it's all very well and good, but why haven't you done thus and such better?" I finally said to him, "Daddy, if I called you and said I've been elected President of the United States, you'd ask me why I weren't Secretary General of the UN. There's no way to win on this."
Why don't you just
Well, I'm not Secretary General of the UN, but I'm trying.
Pretty tough there.
Well, it's interesting about the parents because although it was always a challenge to meet up to the expectations, there were no greater cheerleaders ever, either Tom and Renelle or while we've been growing up. I can't say nice things about people without crying.
I want to tell a
It's one of my
story.
flaws, but one of the things that we have always, I have, and I know my brothers and sisters have always been able to rely on this, is the backing and love of our parents, even when they haven't approved.
Well, as Mother always said,
Once or twice when maybe I've done something they haven't approved of, but nevertheless, they've always been right there. And I think that's really an amazing
You
part.
remember how Daddy decided that he really had to teach Edwin about fishing? It was important for men to fish together. And so they got together and made themselves. Edwin, you should tell this story. There's the time about
What fish?
well, at any rate, you went up and you sat all night and you didn't catch anything. And you, at the end of the evening, you came home and Mother said, "Well, what happened?" And you said, "Well, we decided that I don't like fishing and Daddy doesn't like fishing, so we decided to hell with it." So that was the end of that father-son deal.
But they did catch one that lay on Carol's hand.
You didn't fall back in? Are you kidding? It stuffed it up there over the mouth. The sardines of Tennessee.
Could you explain the circumstances of why it lay on his hand?
He was dead.
That was dead.
Why'd you thank me? You thought it was the big one? Hey, Allison.
So poetic. Richards, I was just, yeah.
I was going to tell the story about how they wouldn't wouldn't let me stay up late at night to study. I was supposed to be really working like a dog, but I was too busy doing other things. So there was the night. So what I finally figured out, my room was the television room. And what I finally figured out to do was, because of course I couldn't leave the light on at night because they would see it under the door, was to put all of my books into the closet, which had a light in it. And then after they went to bed, and I would lie awake frantically waiting for them to go to sleep, or at least turn out the light, so that I could go into the closet and study. I mean, it wasn't studying, it was just getting the homework done. And one night, I'd set that all up. And Mother came in, she had been mending or ironing or whatever lovely mothers did in those days that we do no longer, and came into my room after I was supposedly asleep, opened the closet door and turned on the light to hang the clothes. There, of course, was my study with my Coke and my apples and my books and all the... Mother hung up my clothes, turned on the light, shut the closet door, got back into her room, shut the closet door. I never heard another word about it till this minute. But of course I didn't dare get up because I knew she knew. So then I learned to wait until Daddy would be, I would go downstairs after they'd gone to bed and study down here in this room. And then Daddy would get a call in the middle of the night. And then I was trapped. I couldn't go back up to bed because he would hear me. So I would turn out the lights, Daddy, and wait behind the door here in the living room until you came down the stairs and went out the front door and off to the hospital. And then what to do? If I turned the light back on again, who knew when he'd come home and catch me with the light on? It was a miserable life. I don't know how I survived it. But somehow I'm literate, and I thank you for it.
All things to do, sneak around to study.
It's a lot of things. I want to hear about the expressway and the comic book, black market, and all of that, the Thomases. And that's after my day.
So what about those comic books? We know all of those.
Edmund's project. He apparently solicited his remaining siblings and said to them,
Oh, he had no
if
problem.
you will pay me,
Yeah, for
I
a
will
fee.
see that the funny books are not in the house.
We were not
So
allowed.
there was no funny books in the house. I was out hanging in the
Not even classic comics. I mean, I ask you.
I was out in the yard hanging up the clothes as we did in those old days. And I looked up and saw on the angle of the roof a suitcase. And a rope attached. So I inquired,
And
and
where did the rope go, Mother?
it turned out that Edwin was charging people for keeping the books outside the house, which they were. And this ended that escapade right there.
Mother went up to the third floor and hauled in the suitcase with the funny books in them and threw away. Do you know what they'd be worth today? So our whole cash was gone.
Daddy, I want to hear about how you drove the car to the horror of your father, and some wonderful stories about that old car. Frances can help here. I can see her. I think. Speaking of breaking rules, we weren't the first generation to do it.
Let Luann tell the story about me taking Artie and Jane on a spectacle case.
So he took them out in the afternoon to go for a drive with him. And nothing happened. Mrs. Long and I waited and waited. They didn't come home. When they didn't come home, we began to be concerned.
You didn't mean nothing happened, too much happened.
Well, too much was happening because Carroll had arrived at the home of a patient who was about to be delivered of her child and found that he was needed. And so the little girls had the pleasure of watching the baby be born. And they came home, they were all excited and thrilled. And Mrs. Long was she felt that this was improper.
I take it this is being watched?
I think actually we sat in the car.
Yeah.
But I want to know about Daddy wrecking Dad's car.
Doing what, Hardy?
I think you wrecked Dad's car, didn't you?
Well,
Oh, Frances says she was present, so.
It's Frank's picture.
Yes.
Don't you know the story, Frank?
I don't think I've actually seen
Yes, please.
Graham Morrison had the same kind of problem our father had, a Peerless. And so they decided to race them down Watauga Avenue. And they did, and came to the place where, down at the end of the street, Graham turned in front of us, and we couldn't stop, so we went up in somebody's yard. Remember that, Carol? I don't remember whose yard it was, but
I can take you to the house,
anyway, there we were in the yard, and somehow we got home. I don't know how.
Graham took it.
Did Graham take us? And when next morning, we didn't say a word. We just went to bed. And next morning, somebody called Dad and said, "Your car is over here in the yard. And do you know anything about this, Carol?" And so Carol told what had happened the night before. And what happened then, Carol?
No, I hate to tell.
You mean you couldn't come up with a story before that late in the night?
Good thing.
I've been thinking about it all night too, Ed.
We understand that it's your birthday.
It is.
I'm in between, I'm in between.
Happy
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jonah. Happy birthday to you.
Nice people get born on the 28th of October.
Does she know that
Like
there's
birthdays.
three of us have birthdays today?
Uncle Gregory has a story about his first experience with Daddy.
Yes, that was a memorable occasion.
It was a dark and stormy night.
No, it was in 1975.
Oh.
I was 12 and Carol was 15. He was one of the big boys. And
19 when?
That's when we moved to Johnson City, you and I.
what date did I share?
He said 1975.
He meant 75 years ago.
75 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Whatever that was. Well, that means 1920. Yeah, no.
Well, it was in 1920.
Good thing,
1920. Carroll was one of the big boys, and a bunch of us little kids were selected to go out with one of the big boys, who turned out to be Carroll,
To do what?
to find a Christmas tree.
Oh.
We were going out to find a Christmas tree for the church. And so the the little kids, which included myself, we thought, well, this is gonna be a workout. This big guy, he's gonna show us a few things. So we went out on the Tannery Knob to look for this tree. And we walked up to the top and walked along the ridge there a short ways. And to our amazement, this big guy said, well, I'm getting tired. I'm getting tired. But the smaller group were just having a wonderful time running here and there and so on. And so we walked on a little bit farther, and Carroll said, well, I don't think there are any up here. I think we might as well go home. So we went home. And whether the church had a Christmas tree or not that year, I don't remember, but I imagine that who were better woodsmen than we were.
I don't remember that.
You were one of the little kids, no wonder.
Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
Gregory's father was the operator of the chair company. He was, I don't know what his titles were, but he was the head man in every respect. But when I was working out there, he gave me the job since I was in his Sunday school class. And I thought he might make something out of me. So I worked from whatever time in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but I had to quit at 3 o'clock to keep on with the hours wage law. I used to go across the street from the plant, and there was the Parker residence. And Gregory and I used to go out in the front yard and pass the ball back and forth. And girls may not know what I mean, but we would have a good time. And finally, there got to be some complaints in the plant about that Mr. Parker wanted to settle, and they came up to us and said, you're allowing this employee to go out and just play ball with your underage son. And this is held up against him. Well, that ended the baseball. And Gregory was underage and couldn't work, but I was overage.
Any age. What was high school like? What was high school like? Tell us about it.
Well, it's probably much like it is now. Miller and I Lucy Louise Hatcher. And the thing I remember most of high school was Miss Regina Eisman, who was our junior high school teacher. When we spent 2 years at Columbus Powell, and then went to junior high school, which was the certain portion of the high school building, and spent a whole day in the classroom. We had lunch period, I suppose, didn't we? And Miss Regina Heitman was a great teacher.
Yes, she was. Was that when you threw the bombs off the hill?
Well, that was a little later.
What's this?
1918, just before the war was over, we used to go down to the hardware and buy packages of kind of gunpowder. Just open, weigh it out and stuff free, and then dynamite cap. And we'd go to the high schools up on the bluff, as all you Johnson City know. We'd go up on the high school, and on the northern edge of the ridge that the high school is on, the road ran between the, almost call it a cliff. It was a 50 feet high cliff, and which had only, between it and the creek, only a narrow road. Well, we would get paper sacks, put a load of gunpowder in it, I don't remember how much now. You got a dynamite cap put on the end of the fuse, let the fuse be sticking out the handle of the bag, and we'd get out on that side of the high school, light the fuse, and throw it across the road and into the creek. And when it went off, and he'd throw a column of water, about 30 feet in the air. Fortunately, nobody got his hands blown off. Praise God that we didn't.
Well, I'd be curious to know what enterprising Johnson City businessman sold boys your age dynamite caps and gunpowder. How did you all get those things?
How did we do that? Well,
The laws were different then.
No problem, was it?
no problem.
It was a free country back then. Men were men and women were glad of it.
The other great activity we had was riding the sleds down the high school steps, about 65 steps from the high school down to the street. And it was a great ride.
How much snow did you get?
I got to cover not the steps, but the landings. You hit the landing, you have momentum and you bounce off. You didn't, the sled would jump the steps.
Was that the one that Bill Priest wrote report of?
No, I rode my house, Dr. Reese's steps on Rome Hill.
Oh, did you?
And they broke off one of the steps. Craig wasn't pleased.
Please, Dr. Reed.
See that the days were not dull.
Not at all.
You think the trouble people can get into without drugs?
They don't have near as much fun.
The fellow who wrote the piece in the paper, Tom Hodge, was the son of, what's her first name? Maxine Hodge, who was didn't live constantly in our block, but who lived a good deal of her time there at Mrs. A.J. Davis's. And I used to go sledding with Hope Davis, and I think with Maxine Hodge, who was a cousin. And no, Maxine Hodge was her married name. What was her maiden name?
Maxine Moore.
She was Moore. Yeah, of course, Tom Moore. And that sort of gave Tom an inside look and desire to make the brother show up well with the sweater.
I always understood that you had this sort of wonderful, it was a difficult time in the 30s, but you and Mother came down from Philadelphia, and then Francis was here courting, Uncle Gregory courting, and she was teaching school.
That you and Edith both observed that I don't remember, and they didn't believe me.
Oh, that you didn't believe?
Well, Aunt Luann said that when I was riding the pony one day, she was upstairs folding clothes, and Edith was downstairs ironing or something like that. And that Luann observed me being tossed from the back of the pony, doing a somersault in the air and landing in the saddle. Sounds quite improbable, and that's what she thought, and went down to see Edith, who said, "Oh, Miss Long, you will never believe what I just saw."
I missed your career in the circus.
But I don't remember it.
Well, Scott, you do remember a shot.
I do.
Oh, boy, Daddy's bravest moment.
Well, we all know that Uncle Carroll has been a great proponent of education, even in the most practical matters. And at one point, that same pony tossed Edwin, who landed on his forehead, had to go to the hospital to get sewn up, and it was the most dreaded of all evenings in the family for the children because it was shot night. And we all knew that at the end of the day we were going to be lined up and given typhoid and tetanus shots, and our arms were hurt and we would cry. And Carroll said to me, Scott, you can come to the hospital if you want, and I'll give you your shot there, but you have not to cry. Because I had raised a mighty ruckus in the bathtub the first time the shots had come around. And so I said, okay, and Edwin went and he didn't cry and got sewn up and got his shot, and I got my shot. Or no, sorry, in between Edwin's being sewn up and his shot and my shot, I think Carroll thought that I might not be as good as my word. And so he said, now remember, you're not going to cry, but just to make it easier, he said, if you don't cry, when we get home, I'll let you give me my shot. And sure enough, I was quiet. Then we got home, and all of the other cousins got their shots. And Carroll loaded the syringe with the needle and the serum and said, hold it in your hand like a dart, but don't let go. And so I got across the kitchen, and Carroll was bracing himself in the chair with his arm out like this, and I came trotting around. And Carroll said that he didn't feel it go in, but when the serum went into the periosteum,
That was your greatest hour, Daddy, in my experience. The sun came on like a Grecian warrior with lances. Oh, Daddy, Daddy.
We had interesting times anyway.
There were also images that I remember from that year of living with the Lord. One of them that I didn't see, been recounted often. In one room, Jane and Carol Ann and Frances all slept. And then there was a small bathroom, and there was Mom's room. And the two older girls' beds were over here, and there was this little bed that Frances slept in. And Frances apparently was a light sleeper. And she was up in the middle of the night, and I think it was Jane that woke up and saw her there, remaking her bed at something like 2:30 in the morning or something. And a white figure appeared at the adjoining door. And without saying a word, Mom came and just went, what? Like that, and lifted Frances by her rear end into the bed. And Frances let out this whoop.
It was a lively household. Well, there was always something going on, that's true.
I think Joe needs to tell a story about her and Mother's confrontation.
Oh, yes.
You all remember about that secret compartment?
Your secret what?
Compartment. I needed some place to keep my valuables, my agate marbles and things like that. So I took a hard arsenal with a screwdriver or whatnot and dug out the mortar around a certain brick under the front end of the big porch. And about 3 rows of brick down. And dug and dug and dug and finally got the brick out. And I took off the back part of that brick. So it was just about half the brick left. I put that back in, and then I had in the space which I created by having the brick, I had a secret compartment which I could hide my marbles.
That's where you hid the Easter egg, Daddy. You offered $1 and anyone could find it. It took me 3 weeks to find it.
One $1.
$4.31. I can show you the brick right now.
Well, the story I remember about Joe in my childhood was when she came over on April the 1st and offered us all candy, chocolate candy. And Francis was the first to take a piece.
I remember this vividly.
And it ended up being soap, covered with chocolate. I've always admired Joe ever since.
I cannot take full credit for that because my mother was directing every step.
To an old lady, because the lady couldn't see very well or hear very well either. But she took it out of her, she says, "My God, what is this?"
The old lady wasn't the dean's wife, was she?
No, that was before I moved over here.
No.
Now, Joe, you gotta tell a story about yours and mother's cousin.
She's bigger. There wasn't a whole lot to it. It was in the fall of the year. It wasn't the 7th summer. But anyway, you know, there are these bugs that come out and they start stinging, and when you hear them, you know it's 60 days before first frost. And they come out their noses, and they shed their shells. And Luann was very fond of them. And occasionally I would gift her with one. She was doing the laundry one day down in the basement, and I came over, a little token of my esteem. And she told me that if I brought her any more, she would throw a bucket of water on them. So, you know, I couldn't pass that up. So and she did. And I didn't bother her anymore.
She was drenched. We had washing machines that you emptied and filled. And I had a bucket full.
Can't go over, she squeezed it.
Hey, I'm having jokers.
Guess we'll all remember these stories 10 years from now when we have our next reunion.
Yeah,
Well, we'll have even more by then.
I hope so.
Well, something like that. Anyway, but a bunch of us stayed overnight in the, car, I remember. Not the most comfortable accommodations. But the next morning, you took us to the home of a patient whom you had contacted the afternoon before, who fed us breakfast, which is a breakfast that I remember because she had, you know, in addition to the usual dry cereal, she had a couple kinds of hot cereal, she had fried eggs, she had scrambled eggs, she had toast of various kinds, homemade jellies, bacon, sausage, and so on. Do you remember any of that?
Biscuits.
That's the most satisfying breakfast I think I had.
Did you ever have breakfast at Aunt Ethel's?
No.
We had fried chicken and pound cake along with all these.
Yuck!
They don't do things the way they used to.
Oh, God. You never get that in New York.
That's a real
We've been having correspondence lessons.
No, she already took mine, see?
Why? Oh, too much.
We switched class. So, give me that.
She said a bunch of things for the historical museum.
Hey, you can't put down 2.5.
You're right. During the war, I drove many a day. Help him out. He would drive up to a house, he would jump out and run in, and I'd keep the motor running sometimes right outside that house. Things were so crowded. This schedule was.
Well, I think I remember Daddy telling the story, maybe it was you, Carol, about, I think it was your father going out at night on the horse.
Oh, many times.
And my father, of course, these were really very long distances, minutely described. And on the way home from one of these difficult cases, apparently our grandfather hit his head on a branch and knocked him out, but the horse, knowing its way home, deposited him in the stable before the break of dawn. Is that true, or is that a figment of my father's imagination?
The horse came on home by himself.
Oh, that sounds so
When they found the horse, he was not only minus the rider, he was also minus one stirrup. So they were really very afraid that he had been knocked off and dragged before the stirrup strap broke. Unfortunately, Dad walked in, pretty chipper, except a little disgruntled.
Dad, what's the story about his coming in late one night, having actually made it back, and Mom, in the first flutter of newly married happiness, decided in the middle of the night to drift down in her white nightgown to greet him in the stable. Remember that?
Well, I remember something, I can't remember that.
And you're scared of him, there goes. Don't you ever do that to me again.
He took the horse out and deposited it in the barn, which I guess was 50 feet from the house. We had to walk in the opening. Here's this white figure, I gather. But let me tell you more recent story. We used to have a, I don't know what it's called, Francis out there?
Me, Francis?
Francis,
Right, she's right here.
Here I am.
what was it called, that waste receptacle halfway between the barn and the house?
The privy?
No, this is,
Honey, I don't know.
well, it's a thing you used to get your lunch out of, right?
Well, I hope it wasn't the slop bucket then.
The ground?
What?
Well, there was a garbage can out there. Oh, yeah, and I used to go and see if there was some bread in there. This embarrasses my husband. He hates to hear me say this. But I did. I had such an appetite. I'd take it from anywhere.
Garbage can or not.
Yeah.
The worst thing that ever happened to me as a child was Dad bought me an air rifle. And I got to be a dead shot with it. I even shot Francis once, do you remember that?
No, I remember being shot on the way to Columbus, Powell one time, but that wasn't you, that was somebody else. Fortunately, I had on a hat, if you can believe, well, some of you can believe, that I was wearing a hat to school, and it was a BB shot. Went into the hat, so that it didn't really hurt me. But
Not behind, though.
That was always a good shot. Did she shoot out through your-
Never missed a person you aimed at, did you?
I knew she did.
I shot out all the windows upstairs.
Don't shoot out some of our windows.
Yeah, I did that.
no,
No,
Can't believe you got away that easy.
can't believe it, no. I still got that gun too.
I remember one time that the Crouches, Adam Crouch lived two places down the street from where we were. Oscar Lewis was my pal. Oscar and I decided we didn't like the Crouches. So, about the time the apple season was in, the Crouches decided they'd have their house painted white. That big green two-story house painted white. But then they made the mistake of not staying home to protect it. So Oscar and I believe Edwin and I, Scott's father and I did this. We got a box of rotten apples and got over in the backyard of the Crouch's house and just peppered this quite great, quite expanse of rotten apples. And then ran.
Yeah, all we can say, Carol, is that we wish we had known these stories when we were growing up.
Well, I want to
This
say
is
something.
50 years too late.
I want to tell you something good about Scott's father. He was 9 years older than I, and my next best friend was about 3 years older than I. But anyway, we were having a rough time in the alley war up and down 100 block of Walnut Street. The Crouch boys, there were two families of Crouches, and they had adherents. They all went to Christian church, and all the Christian church people went to the Third War, we thought. But anyway, they just had a big army, and we had trouble recruiting the troops for our army. So we finally taught my big brother, 9 years older than we were, to come join us, and he did so under one condition. That is, they would never use their air rifle on the other side.
Never use it to what?
Air rifle.
On the other side.
And that may have been the thing that saved some tragedy.
This sounds like a precursor of gang wars, doesn't it?
Yes.
Boys and Hatfields.
The church gang.
Mrs. Landreth lived just back of us on Maple Street. Miss Landreth was an old lady. And Dad used to take me over there. They were good friends. Used to take me over there for lunch occasionally. And she had, what she called it?
Right here, but I don't know what she called it.
Dumplings and
Chicken and
Chicken and dumplings?
chicken dumplings. But there's a special name she had for them. And then we used to go there for chicken and dumplings.
Well, she's the one who liked bile custard.
Yeah, bile custard.
Bile custard.
Yeah.
We used to take that to her sometimes.
You know about custard. Any of you, next generation people know what bile custard is?
Yeah, we do.
Custard pudding.
Boiled custard.
Yeah. She called it bile custard.
What is it?
Boiled custard.
It's just what custard you make.
What you make when you either got too much milk or too many
Got a lot of eggs and little gelatin.
Long eggs and little eggs. You can't have too much milk or too many eggs.
Too little eggs.
Too little eggs.
Not too many. Not too many? Too much
Many
milk
eggs and too little milk.
Well, if you have too much of either one of them, you see, you can't let it go to waste. So you
Sally,
make
you
more
used to
custard.
live close by. What happened to you?
Oh, I was always an innocent bystander. I never did anything.
I don't believe that.
Nope.
Who's this innocent bystander?
Who's this sweet person? Sweet little precious Sally. Never did anything. I did have such good times in this, when I would sneak out my house down here. It was really fun. Well, I can remember when Sally and I were both in dancing school, and Mother was having Carroll in. It turned out that my dance costume for the recital had not been ordered because of complications of new babies and Jane, a little child, and whatever. And so when the night came, Mother was in the hospital, and I was taken to the dance recital to do my thing. And no, I don't know quite how to say it. There'd been no costumes made for me, so suddenly there I was. And Sally was a great star on the dance scene when we were 3 and 4. With Maxwell around my toes. Was it the doodle bug that you were? I've forgotten. It was some magnificent stuff. Swan Lake had nothing to do with it. And so
The costume looked like chickens.
I think,
With frayed stuff all over.
well, I think I was allowed to wear it for my thing beforehand. And so I wore the doodle bug or the goggly wog or whatever it was and danced my little part in the thing. And then Sally came forth and did the sort of Margot Fontaine bit. And then I remember still the last thing was something whereby in those days of wonderful female freedom, we were all at the age of 3 dressed as mothers and pushing our baby carriages around. And my mother was in the hospital having another baby and had not made my costume to wear as a mother to push my baby carriage around. So I sat in the audience and wept while all of this went on. I've been so glad ever since.
Yes, I can understand.
Excuse me. This is Francis, would you like to look at it? I had Cameron's cake. Mine and I'm good. I'm ready to be.
I'm surprised Cameron let you do that.
Well, I think it's the second birthday.
Oh.
Is that Ingrid?
What?
I've got days to practice. Well, I'm sure not.
Daddy's
Your practice, or not.
That is practical. There's always run out.
Tell the story, Daddy, about the lady who had the needle in her arm.
I don't know that one. Needle in her arm.
Yes, you had a woman who came in to see the great surgeon, needed an operation. She'd been recommended to you as the great consultant, and you were examining her and getting ready for this really important specialist's attention. You said, good heavens, what are you doing with that needle broken off on your arm? And she said, well, years ago when I was a young thing, I had a little medical problem and I went to a hospital in Philadelphia. There was a young intern there, didn't know how to handle a needle whatsoever, and damned if he didn't break the needle off in my arm. You asked a few more questions and then you ceased to ask any.
I retired in silence.
Really, he removed
I
the
don't think
needle.
you ever told her after her operation was successful and she had been saved from a life of perpetual pain or death, that it was you who had broken off the
Your first smile when you started hearing the story gave you away. And I got it on tape.
Strange you would forget that one.
Yes.
broke off.
Right at the skin. There was. Why wouldn't you just get a pair of tweezers?
Well, ask him.
I'll tell you what I did do once. It might answer your question. Man came in with a small fatty tumor underneath the skin of his chest. I told him he ought to, it was his lower chest, ought to have it removed, and he reached the hospital. I took him to the operating room and under general anesthetic, tried to remove the tumor. But the tumor had been held up against the skin by the tight muscle underneath while the patient was awake. And once he'd been put to sleep and told to relax, there's nothing holding the tumor up and I couldn't find it. Nothing to do but to quit. So I quit, he sued me and we paid about $5,000.
Hold it up.
What?
I don't understand how it
It's the muscle. See, there's skin and then there's fatty tissue and then there's muscle. And this fatty tumor was at the level between the muscle and the skin. And when the muscle was tense, that's when he was awake, lying on a table. The tumor was pushed up against the skin so you could feel it, the size of a marble. And then when he was,
Relax.
when he was, no, I've got it back. When he was awake, he was held up tight against the skin. But when we put him to sleep and tried to operate on him, he was so sound asleep we couldn't find the tumor.
Why in a case like that don't you just say, you know, I made a mistake, sorry, come back and I'll take it out for free when I've got it figured out the right way?
Mark, we'll take a magic marker and put it around it.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well, that's exactly what I did, but he thought the $5,000 plus a smaller fee would be more to his liking.
Well, he didn't have magic
Got
markers
sued
back
twice in my, 3 times in my, twice in my career. The other time was a man who sued me because his newborn child came down with gonorrhea ophthalmia.
Newborn child, what?
Came down with what?
Gonorrhea ophthalmia. Gonorrhea.
Is that what you gave? No, that's not what you gave the drops for, straight after birth.
It's a
Well, yes.
gonorrhea infection in the eyes.
That's right. And the question was, did you? Well, I always did every time I had a relator, but I couldn't remember that particular case and refused to testify that I had. Too honest, people being too honest, I guess. But it was one of those home deliveries in which the only other person present was a granny lady.
What, the mother's mother, you mean?
But the mother, no, this granny lady is
Did
a
what?
home nurse.
Granny lady. And we're granny ladies?
On colloquialisms and literature. What is your thesis?
Where is Roger?
He's sitting quietly in the corner.
What is your thesis? What's the subject of your thesis?
Oh, mules.
Mules. Mules.
Mules in Southern literature and
Oh.
folk.
Somebody in our institution here has put out a modest volume of country terms for medically related subjects. It's very interesting. Joanne, do we have a copy here?
I've seen it, I know where it is, it's just over.
Yes, you have it.
If you can find it, let our expert here look at it.
Yeah, you want to know about mules, but we're afraid to ask.
That's right. There's a lot of this. I think the theory is that women and mules
What's
are.
going on up there?
I think it's up there.
There are adults up there. Noise, what's it in the? I'll check it out.
Downstairs, isn't it, James? But there were laws against mistreating the mules.
Nobody else. In other words, it was a complete fiction that women and mules were mistreated in the Old South.
Mules are treated great, yeah.
I'm waiting, what was it about? That the mules were better treated than women?
Who said that?
I'm asking.
Were they better treated than men?
Uh-huh.
No, that was why men, especially black men and poor whites, saw themselves as mules because they received the same treatment. They became icons. Mule was an icon for the poor white and black sharecropper in the South. So the folklore then relates the same kind of iconic relationship between the two.
And women.
Relationship. Then there was a relationship of the mule and the mulatto. The mule being a hybrid, the mulatto being characterized the same way. Again, same iconization.
Eager to get into your purse.
Oh.
And mulatto and mule are related, same
Same
word.
derivative of the word, possibly. Mulo, right? So again, either being a hybrid. So yeah, there's the relationship that is there. The mule is neither a horse nor a jackass. The mulatto is is neither white nor black, but yet is both white and black. So the iconicity. No, C.S. Pierce, who was talking about symbols, icons, and indexes in relation to semiology.
You do have a bigger head than I thought. I think it fits you.
One size fits all.
What do you say to your mommy?
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Mrs. Big Head.
Sure, it's quiet in here.
Dad, you recording?
This is to Jim from the Attic Squirrels.
From who?
The
Attic
squirrel.
squirrels.
Uh-oh.
Cameron, what?
Aha.
Put you in the figure 4 headlock.
Bigger boy head up.
Aha. That's what I got from the attic squirrel.
I'd say let's open them up. Put your shirt on, Karen. I'll see if
I'd say we need to put some traps up in the attic for the
They
attic.
are cool.
They're different.
my answer there.
Delightfully different. Let's
I
see.
got some other ones if y'all want to choose from.
Well, those. Who did them? Somebody at work.
My manager done. She felt
Fred didn't get me anything.
Yes, I did.
You did.
There's something around there somewhere.
Thank you, Maria.
Where?
Oh yeah.
It's up in the tree.
Now,
Wait, I'm picking my buggers then. Excuse me.
Be sure and say it real loudly so we can pick it up on tape too.
to Papa Smurf from Santa Claus. Is that from you, Jim? I said it 2 or 3 times. I didn't get it.
Why is that?
Because
Are we ready?
it's on the carpet.
Yep.
It's soft.
How about that? Toward the picture there. Even though the Supercross is coming in there, it's recording what it sees right there. It doesn't really have a